Today, we're talking about a huge shift in US policy that's making headlines worldwide. President Trump has reversed a controversial freeze on arms shipments to Ukraine, resuming critical deliveries like Patriot missile interceptors, just as Russia intensifies its attacks. This decision reveals a complicated story of politics, strategy, and diplomacy, and it's sending shockwaves through Kyiv, Moscow, and Europe alike. So, what exactly happened, and what does it tell us about Trump's strategy toward the Russia-Ukraine war? Let's break it all down. For months, Trump's Pentagon leadership had been sounding the alarm about depleted US weapons stockpiles, especially after heavy use in the Middle East. Just recently, the administration quietly ordered a halt to shipping crucial air defense munitions to Ukraine, including Patriot interceptors and Stinger missiles. The reason? US inventories were running low. Defense officials argued that if America kept sending these systems abroad at the same pace, it wouldn't have enough to defend itself in another crisis. But the freeze caught many in Trump's circle off guard, including the president himself, who aides say wasn't fully briefed on the move at first. After learning about the pause, Trump moved quickly to reverse it. He authorized the shipment of 10 Patriot interceptors to Ukraine immediately and signaled that future deliveries would go forward on a more carefully reviewed, case-by-case basis. According to the NYT reporting, this shift was partly driven by the realization that Russian forces were stepping up their offensive, threatening key regions like Dnipropetrovsk in central Ukraine. Cutting off defensive weapons at that moment could have given Russia a major advantage on the battlefield and potentially collapsed parts of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. For Ukraine, the reversal was critical. Ukrainian officials have been pleading for more air defense systems to shoot down Russian missiles and drones that pound cities night after night. Zelensky's top aide, Andriy Yermak, praised Trump's decision, calling it proof that the US remains a reliable partner and saying it could actually push Russia toward real negotiations. From Kyiv's perspective, losing American air defense shipments, even temporarily, would have been disastrous, leaving civilian infrastructure vulnerable and demoralizing frontline forces just as they brace for intensified Russian assaults. But while Ukraine welcomed the change, European allies have been left deeply unsettled by the overall back and forth. Earlier this year, Trump's administration signaled it might tie future aid to Ukraine, agreeing to negotiate directly with Moscow, and even threatened to block Kyiv's NATO membership bid. European leaders have described these moves as dangerously short-sighted, worried they effectively hand Russia a win by undercutting Ukraine's leverage at the table. At security conferences across Europe, there's been frank talk that if the US wavers, Europe will need to massively increase its own defense budgets, potentially up to 5% of GDP, to fill the gap. None of this is entirely unexpected if you paid attention to Trump's 2024 campaign. He repeatedly promised he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours, boasting he could force both sides to a deal. He also slammed what he called the endless flow of American money to Kyiv, vowing to make Europe pay more and to prioritize refilling US arsenals. In a sense, the Pentagon's initial pause on weapons deliveries was exactly in line with these campaign promises, aimed at slowing the pipeline and conserving American resources. But the sudden resumption of shipments reveals the tension between Trump's America First rhetoric and the hard realities of the war. So why did Trump change course? Part of it was simply the battlefield situation. Intelligence suggested Russian forces were making gains precisely because Ukraine's air defense interceptors were running low. Cutting them off risked triggering a collapse in Ukraine's central regions with major geopolitical consequences. There was also intense diplomatic pressure. Ukrainian leaders made clear they saw the pause as a betrayal, while European allies feared it would embolden Putin and fracture NATO unity. Ultimately, Trump appears to have concluded that sending a limited batch of interceptors now was better than risking a Russian breakthrough that would be far costlier to contain later. For Vladimir Putin, this whole episode is something of a gift. Even the brief pause in US weapon shipments gave Russian commanders a window to step up offensives and test Ukrainian defenses. Beyond the battlefield, the policy whiplash in Washington plays into Moscow's long-term strategy of dividing NATO and sowing doubts about America's reliability as a security partner. By talking about peace deals without Kyiv in the room and threatening to block Ukraine's NATO ambitions, Trump has sent signals that the US might ultimately accept a negotiated settlement on Russia's terms, something Putin has wanted from the start. At the same time, Trump's moves aren't purely about helping Russia, they're also classic Trump, playing hardball to extract concessions from allies. By pausing aid, he forced Europe to confront its own defense spending shortfalls, with some NATO members now planning to ramp up military budgets dramatically. He can also claim to American voters that he's prioritizing US security first by reviewing weapons stockpiles. And by resuming shipments, he can argue he's not abandoning Ukraine outright, positioning himself as the only leader tough enough to make both allies and adversaries bend to America's will. Since Russia's 2022 invasion, the US has given Ukraine around $69 billion in military aid, making it Kyiv's biggest supporter. This includes advanced air defense systems like Patriots and NASAMS, hundreds of artillery pieces with millions of shells, thousands of anti-tank missiles, rocket systems like HIMARS, tanks, armored vehicles, drones, helicopters, and over 500 million rounds of small arms ammo. This huge flow of weapons has kept Ukraine fighting despite massive Russian assaults, but it has also strained US stockpiles and sparked debates over long-term sustainability, reflecting Washington's view of the conflict as a critical stand against authoritarian aggression. In the end, Trump's handling of Ukraine is a messy mix of electoral politics, genuine strategic dilemmas, and personal deal-making style. He wants to end the war, but on terms he can sell to American voters. He wants to cut costs, but without triggering a Russian victory that would damage US credibility. And he wants to look tough, both on Putin and on Europe. Whether that balancing act holds, especially as the war drags on and Russia tests the West's resolve, remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: Trump's approach has already forced Ukraine, Europe, and Russia to recalibrate their strategies.